Her name is Sarah Fenske, and they have a great article in today's newspaper. Sarah Fenske, you were on the Big 550 KTRS. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
In terms of full disclosure, I have not purchased a Riverfront Times since they fired DJ Wilson.
Well, I don't think anyone has, since you can't buy the thing. You have to get it for free.
I understand,
so.
but DJ is and was a friend of mine, and I feel a certain bond, and so I'm not paying for a Riverfront Times since they fired him. So there you go.
Well, that's a fair decision to make. Hopefully the rest of the city will forgive us for that at some point, since I think that was 3 ownerships ago.
That was 16 years ago, but there you go. All right. Sarah Fenske, you have a great article, great column in the paper, the weekly Riverfront Times, things you haven't done in St. Louis but should. So let's go through some of these, because this is a great list, because some we've done, some we've never heard of, and some we would like to do. So, for example, the one that stood out to me was, why in the world would I want to go see the ceiling of a Uhaul building?
I was initially with you on this until I found myself reading about it in the New York Times, and I was laughing. I'm like, this is why St. Louis is in the New York Times? Like, at least it's not crime for once, right? But it turns out that there is architectural significance to this ceiling. It's the Uhaul outlet at Kingshighway, just north of Shaw. And it was designed by, I will admit, someone I've never heard of, but those who know more about these things say this guy is a big deal. Isamu Noguchi is his name. And it had been covered up for years. They had one of those crappy 70s drop ceilings over it.
Right.
And then they discovered that this, undulating, sort of almost sculpturesque ceiling was hidden underneath that. And they've now done a revamp where it's fully exposed. And this Uhaul store is totally cool with people just coming in, not purchasing anything from Uhaul, but checking out this amazing ceiling that has now gotten national attention.
It is the Uhaul. It's a weird Uhaul building because it's giant. It's the biggest building in the area, right next to Highway 44, and you can see it from miles around. But who knew that Uhaul would come in and cover up what is considered a magnificent architectural, cultural icon, right?
Yeah, my understanding of this is a previous tenant was the one who did the deadly deed of covering up this ceiling. And Uhaul is actually to be praised because they've now exposed it and let the masses again enjoy this architectural marvel.
When did they discover this? It was relatively recently, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was discovered maybe a couple years ago, but it was only very recently unveiled.
All right.
They were thinking about trying to do some sort of museum exhibit. I mean, it's just the craziest thing. It just goes to show there's like weird little treasures hidden everywhere in this town.
No, it really does. And that's what makes St. Louis is this weird, strange, mix of rich and poor and great cultural things that you walk by every day and you never even knew existed.
Yeah, I mean, editing this list was so fun for me. I moved here from Los Angeles, and it was so easy to put together a list in LA of like, here's all this touristy kind of stuff that you could take your friends and family to. But only in St. Louis do you have stuff that is just so random, hidden in plain sight, a lot of it free. And on some level, so much cooler than here's something that's going to cost you, $20 a head, and you'll be queued up with all these other tourists from all over the country. Like, what's going on here is so much more organic and so much more interesting to me.
And that comes from a woman who was from Los Angeles. So there you go. How about, I didn't even know this was around, the International Photography Hall of Fame and Museum?
Yeah. I mean, how cool is that? And it's right there in the Grand Center area of Midtown. And they've got all sorts of special exhibits that sort of come through there. Tickets are just $5, which is amazing. It's like, what else can you do for $5 anymore? And I got to admit, this is on my list. As I was editing this, I'm like, how have I not gone to this yet? But the writer who's been there, she said it really is great.
The International Photography Hall of Fame. So what are some of the things you see at the International Photography Hall of Fame?
That's a good question, and that's why this one is on my bucket list. I do not know yet.
All right.
But I know that it's, this is one of these where you're going to see great photography. And, I feel like that's the sort of art we can all relate to. It might be hard to look at a painting from the 17th century and be that excited about, but photography, I mean, that's cataloging all of our lives and the news that we've all grown up seeing.
Sarah Fenske with us from the Riverfront Times. Was RFT.com?
RiverfrontTimes.com.
RiverfrontTimes.com, but pick it up at a newsstand near you. Who is Stagger Lee?
So you've heard of the song Staggerly, right? It's this sort of early rock and roll hit.
Okay. I believe you.
And he was a famous murder victim. I guess that's why he's memorialized in the song.
Okay, right. All right, yeah, right, sure.
Oh, wait, sorry. Stagger Lee was the murderer.
Okay.
And, of course, so he becomes the hero of the rock and roll song. And so it turns out he was a guy who really existed, and he is here at the Greenwood Cemetery, which is in Hillsdale.
Gotcha, okay. There's a lot of cemeteries, and I know people, for things to do in St. Louis, which is this article in the Riverfront Times, 50 things to do here in St. Louis. Going and visiting some cemeteries, I actually did that. And I hate to say this publicly, that was a lot of fun.
I think so. I was kind of embarrassed that, once we put this list together, I realized we had 3 cemeteries on here. But they're all really cool, and in each case, there's somebody whose grave you can visit that really does have some significance, not just in the life of the city, but the life of the country. We've got Stagger Lee is at Greenwood Cemetery. Tennessee Williams, fascinatingly, ended up at the big Catholic cemetery, Calvary, which... here he is this famous homosexual playwright and sort of very proud of what he stood for, and then ends up at this place where the Catholics are now tending his tombstone. And then you've also got, is it Bellefontaine, I think, where
Right.
William S. Burroughs is buried.
Right.
Well, so a lot of great people come from St. Louis, and whether or not they want to come home, they end up coming home.
Yeah.
And, you can go pay homage to them.
The Saxophone Museum, no idea the Saxophone Museum was in St. Louis.
Yeah, this is another one that I personally was not aware of either, but the writer who went there, she just loved it. This is one that is completely free. It's upstairs from this music shop on Cherokee Street, and the owner is apparently, he's one of those experts who shows up on like Antique Roadshow
Right.
and tells people how much their thing is worth. So he really knows what he's talking about. And he's apparently just personally put together this collection of rare saxophones, vintage photos, historical recordings. He's curated the whole thing. He's got it upstairs from his shop, and he's happy to show it off to anybody who wants to take a look.
Yeah, the Saxophone Museum, the International Photography Museum. It's amazing how if you just sort of go in there with an open mind, how you can be blown away by some of these sort of obscure museums.
Yeah, it's just interesting how many we have in this town. And, we sort of centered this issue around the idea of hit the road, that you could take a road trip and just drive for an hour in any direction. But the reason we added this list to it, and it ended up being the list that I think everybody's even more excited about than the road trips, you don't actually have to even leave St. Louis. Mm-hmm. I think there's so many of us kind of stick to our own neighborhood. You have like the fun bar there that you go to. You have your regular restaurant. I think if you just get out of your neighborhood or get out of your section of the city, it's kind of amazing how many little hidden things there are that if you were in a different city playing tourist, you would totally check out.
Sarah Fenske is with us, editor-in-chief of the Riverfront Times. Things you haven't done in St. Louis but should, riverfronttimes.com. Also newsstands everywhere. All right, Sarah, last question for you. I'll come clean if you come clean. What's the one thing on this list you were embarrassed that you hadn't been to yet?
Oh, boy. I guess I should be embarrassed I've never been to Larry Flint's Hustler Club. I mean, I am the editor of the RFT, right? Like, I should be there every night. And I have not yet done the whole Metro East strip club thing.
That is a total lame answer. I haven't been to the. No, I mean, I believe you. You haven't been to the Hustler Club. I just find it. I'd find it. All right, fair enough. I'll tell you mine.
I just admitted I'm not cool. I mean, come on, you've got that now on the air.
Well, yeah, I don't. That's actually a good thing that you haven't been to the Hustler Club, but that's beside the point. I would say of all of these, I mean, there's quite a few. This is a great list for anybody who loves St. Louis, because there are things that you didn't know about, but you want to go. The one I am just ashamed of myself that I haven't been to, and that is the 5 Frank Lloyd Wright homes built here in St. Louis.
Yeah. That is something you're right. That is a more embarrassing admission. I have not done that yet either. And I feel like that's probably something we should both do this weekend.
Right. I mean, we would drive to go see Falling Water, right? But we have Frank Lloyd Wright homes in our own hometown, and we don't go and see it. So,
yeah,
shame.
It's so typical. It's what makes St. Louis sometimes frustrating. It's like we'd rather complain about what we don't have than go check out what we do.
Very good. Sarah Fenske, editor-in-chief of the Riverfront Times. You will not find her at Larry Flint's Hustler Club this weekend. Sarah, have a good weekend. Thanks for playing around with us.
All right. Thanks for having me.
You got it.